Have you ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed simply because you didn't fit someone else's idea of who you should be? What if I told you that the very people who tried to erase you are the ones who will one day have to recognize your undeniable worth? The black SUV eased to a halt in front of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the flashbulbs already firing in every direction. Reporters craned their necks, influencers adjusted their phones mid-live stream, and stylists scrambled behind ropes to catch a glimpse of the next celebrity emerging. The MET Gala, fashion's Super Bowl, was in full swing, and the elite had arrived. Then the back door of the SUV creaked open. Out stepped a woman no one recognized. No entourage, no assistant clutching a designer bag. Just her, tall, poised, and wrapped in a one-of-a-kind gown stitched from deep indigo silk and cowrie shells. Her natural hair shaped like a crown, skin glowing like it had been kissed by every sunrise on earth. A living work of art. But the silence that followed her exit was chilling. The paparazzi glanced at each other. No camera clicks. No shouts of, "Over here!" A few lenses lowered. She took one step forward. A snide whisper cut through the crowd. "Who invited her?" Another voice louder. "Is she someone's plus one?" The fashion correspondents along the press barricade didn't even lift their microphones. One stylist muttered into her phone, "No clue who that is. Maybe she's here to deliver something?" The woman didn't blink. She simply lifted her chin, locked eyes with the golden carpet ahead, and walked. She walked like she belonged there, and that was the problem. Security perked up. A guard with a Bluetooth headset placed his hand on his hip. Another reached for a guest list. They didn't recognize her, and that made her a threat, not because of anything she did, but because of how she looked, how she dared to carry herself like she was royalty. Still, she kept walking, unshaken, like she knew something the rest of the world hadn't caught up to yet. She didn't need anyone to roll out the red carpet. She was the carpet, the story, the moment. But within seconds, a figure in a black blazer was striding toward her fast, hand raised, eyes suspicious. He was about to make the biggest mistake of the night. The tension in the air was sharp enough to slice through couture. She had barely crossed the first velvet rope when a security guard, stocky, scowling, and visibly irritated, stepped into her path. His hand shot out like a barrier, stopping her with the kind of force reserved for intruders, not invited guests. "Ma'am, this area is restricted." His tone wasn't curious. It was condescending. She looked at his hand, then up at him, her expression cool, not confrontational, just certain. Still, the murmurs around them grew louder. Guests glanced over, sensing drama. Influencers lifted their phones again. Even fashion bloggers, who had initially ignored her arrival, began filming, not to document her beauty, but to capture her embarrassment. "Restricted to who?" she asked, voice calm, silken. The guard didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward a woman with a clipboard near the check-in kiosk. "Credentials," he said sharply. "Let's see your credentials." Without a word, the woman reached into a beaded clutch, tiny, elegant, handmade, and pulled out a gold-trimmed invitation. Not a replica, not a knockoff. The real thing, her name embossed in calligraphy, the date and theme of the gala printed in deep red ink. The guard barely glanced at it. "This can't be right," he muttered, scanning her up and down like a metal detector. His eyes didn't just inspect, they dismissed. "You must have been sent to the wrong entrance. The main carpet's for confirmed guests only." A group of stylists nearby chuckled. One of them, draped in silver fringe, leaned over and whispered, "She probably won a radio contest." The woman remained composed. Her eyes didn't leave the guards. "I was flown in," she said softly. "Personally." "By who?" he shot back. A pause. She smiled, not to convince him, but because she didn't owe him proof. She had already done her part. She showed up. She walked with grace. She carried her legacy in every stitch of that gown. But as more guards approached, flanking her like she was a threat, the crowd swelled with curiosity. Phones captured everything, and somewhere behind the barricades, someone very important was watching, about to step in and flip the entire narrative. By now, the scene had fully shifted. What began as a quiet moment had ballooned into a public spectacle. She stood poised beneath the Met Gala's iconic archway, but instead of a carpet walk, she was surrounded, not by admirers, but by security guards tightening their formation. Each wore the same expression, practiced indifference laced with suspicion. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside while we confirm your status," said a taller guard with a clipboard. He didn't even look her in the eyes, just flipped through pages, bypassing her name like it couldn't possibly be there. The crowd watched like it was theater. TikToks were already live, comments flooding in. "Who is she? This is embarrassing." Security's wild for this one. Behind the guard, a woman in a diamond-crusted mask leaned toward her partner and whispered just loud enough to be heard. "Guests of honor don't look like her." She heard it. Everyone did. But still she didn't flinch. Her silence was louder than their ridicule. Her stillness, defiant. Even as her identity was questioned, her dignity remained intact. Unshakable, like it had endured this kind of scrutiny before. "Ma'am," the guard repeated, this time with forced patience, "you're not on the list." She raised an eyebrow, took a breath, and answered, "Check again." "Under Congresswoman Jasmin Crockett." That name cut through the noise like a record scratch. The security team froze. One of the younger guards stepped away with a walkie-talkie, whispering urgently. You could almost hear the regret brewing as the realization settled in. She wasn't someone crashing the party. She was someone important. But instead of correcting themselves or offering an apology, they tried to save face. "We're just doing our job," the first guard muttered, gesturing her to the side. "We'll get this sorted out soon." She turned her head slowly, scanning the faces. Most filled with smug curiosity, others gleeful in her temporary rejection. Little did they know, she was exactly where she was meant to be, and in less than 2 minutes, someone who could shut the whole event down was about to make her entrance. The velvet rope hadn't moved, but the line between curiosity and cruelty had vanished. Phones were raised like weapons, not to protect her, but to record her downfall. In the age of virality, a misunderstood moment could become a meme within seconds. And here she was, standing alone, lit by the cruel glow of dozens of phone screens as security debated her worth. "This is wild," one influencer whispered into her mic. "She's clearly in the wrong place." Another added, "She's wearing something." But I don't think Anna Wintour would co-sign that. The crowd wasn't whispering anymore. They were commenting in real time, not just online, but in person, throwing daggers cloaked in sarcasm. "She got that dress from Etsy. She's probably someone's intern who wandered off. She looks like she's auditioning for the Woman King too." Yet she didn't respond, not with words. Her silence was a fortress. Her eyes scanned the horizon, not in panic, but in patience. She knew how this worked. She'd seen enough doors slammed in her face to recognize when power was performative. What no one noticed, not the influencers, not the guards, not even the stylists whispering about her hair being too ethnic for the theme, was the sleek black car that had just pulled up to the curb. The door opened. A red heel touched the ground first, then a flash of bold crimson fabric, and finally a familiar face stepped into the light. It was Congresswoman Jasmin Crockett. Not in a hurry, not flustered, just focused. Eyes locked on the woman surrounded by guards like a suspect, not a guest. The crowd began to murmur again. But this time, it wasn't laughter. It was uncertainty, realization. Because Jasmine wasn't just a politician, she was a headline maker, a policy shaker. And in this moment, she looked like justice personified. One of the guards turned to see her approaching, and suddenly everything shifted. Postures stiffened, phones trembled, and for the first time all night, someone moved with urgency toward her, not away from her. The woman on the carpet didn't move a muscle, because the moment she had been waiting for had arrived. The driver barely had time to circle the car before the passenger door opened with a crisp click, and out stepped Congresswoman Jasmin Crockett. She didn't wave. She didn't pose. She didn't acknowledge the flashing cameras trying to catch a glimpse of whatever statement gown she might be wearing. No, her statement was already walking 3 steps ahead of her, in the form of unwavering purpose. The moment Jasmine's red stilettos hit the carpet, the mood cracked like glass. She wasn't dressed to impress. She was dressed to command. Her floor-length cape billowed like justice itself, her eyes lined with precision, her expression unreadable but electric. You could feel the temperature shift. The security guard who had been interrogating the woman just seconds earlier suddenly looked unsure. He stood straighter, eyes darting toward the clipboard as if to double-check something he should have known all along. But it was too late. Jasmin Crockett walked directly up to the woman, her guest, and without hesitation linked arms with her. And then she spoke, not with volume, but with authority. "Is there a problem with my guest?" The lead guard cleared his throat. We were just verifying." "You didn't verify. You profiled," she snapped. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones caught every syllable. "You assumed she didn't belong because you didn't recognize her, because she didn't have an entourage or a designer's logo stitched across her chest. You didn't even look at the invitation." The guard opened his mouth again, but Jasmine didn't give him the chance. She was invited, not just to attend, not as a +1. She was flown in, honored, and asked to walk the carpet because of who she is, not because of who you think she should be. A stunned silence followed. Even the fashion bloggers were quiet now. One lowered her camera. Another just whispered, "Oh my God." The woman, still arm in arm with the Congresswoman, didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply nodded, calm, poised, exactly as she had been from the beginning. Because when you've earned your place through resilience, brilliance, and unshakable dignity, you don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to stand. And tonight, she stood taller than anyone on that carpet. The press line, usually a well-oiled machine of snapping lenses and shouted names, had fallen into stunned silence. The guard stood motionless, trapped in the uncomfortable spotlight of accountability. Jasmin Crockett's words still hung in the air like smoke. "You were about to remove the guest of honor," she repeated, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the murmurs around them. This time, no one dared interrupt. A young assistant from the event team rushed over, nearly tripping over her heels. She was flustered, cheeks pink, headset slipping from one ear. "Congresswoman Crockett, we apologize for the confusion. It was a mix-up at the security checkpoint." Jasmine turned her head slowly. "Number?" "It wasn't a mix-up," she said. "It was a mindset." The crowd reacted audibly to that, whispers spreading like brush fire. She looked down at the woman beside her, who stood like a pillar, never once rattled, never once asking for validation, and that's what made this moment so seismic. She hadn't just shown up to a world that didn't recognize her, she had forced it to reconsider itself. Jasmine stepped forward, speaking now not just to security, but to every camera, every blogger, every cynic in the crowd. Tonight's theme is reflections of power, and yet the most powerful woman here was nearly turned away because she didn't fit your expectation of what that power should look like. That ends now. The crowd stirred. TikTokers began whispering her quote into their phones. Journalists scrambled for tweets. One outlet had already posted, "Jasmin Crockett just checked the Met Gala, on its own red carpet." The event coordinator, now pale, rushed forward with a PR smile. "We're ready to escort your guest inside now, of course. Would she like to do her press walk?" Crockett turned to her guest and nodded gently. But the woman, glowing, composed, raised one perfectly arched brow and said, "I don't need the press walk. I already made my entrance." And just like that, the cameras finally began to flash. Not for a scandal, not for a gown, but for a moment. She didn't turn around to face the flashing lights. She didn't pause to angle her body or strike a pose. Instead, she walked forward, slow, deliberate, regal, arm in arm with Jasmin Crockett, past the rope that once served as a boundary and now felt more like a broken relic. The carpet hadn't changed color, but the energy had. Every step she took rewrote the rules. Not with force, not with fury, but with presence. A presence too rare to be staged, too honest to be manufactured, and too powerful to be ignored any longer. Inside the museum's grand steps, the art had already been arranged. Portraits from designers across the globe, tributes to icons, fabrics that cost fortunes. But no one in that gallery had as much weight as the woman who just walked in from the margins. Her story wasn't sewn into the seams of a legacy brand. It was carved through years of invisibility, challenge, and quiet resistance. And that night, that truth shimmered brighter than any diamond on display. The press finally caught up, shouting now, begging for her name. "What's your name, ma'am? Who designed your dress? Are you a performer, an activist, a designer?" She didn't slow, didn't shout, but turned her head just enough to let her voice reach them. "My name is Zora Sinclair. I design for those who were never meant to be seen." And with that, she disappeared behind the marble doors of the MET, leaving the press stunned and scrambling to Google her. Within minutes, Twitter was on fire. Zora Sinclair just gave the most iconic entrance of the night, without saying a word. She didn't walk the carpet, she made the carpet worth walking. MET Gala security fumbled, but Zora delivered. Fashion blogs rushed to find her portfolio. Designers scrambled to claim they'd known her. Stylists who had laughed now tweeted support, but Zora wasn't concerned with the noise. She wasn't there for the photos or the praise. She came because she was invited. She stayed because she was worthy. And when she walked, head high past the flashbulbs and doubters, she didn't just claim space, she redefined it. The night she walked past security like royalty reclaiming her throne, Zora Sinclair became more than a guest. She became a moment. By morning, the internet had done what it does best, crown a queen. Zora Sinclair trended on every platform, not because of a wardrobe malfunction or a viral pose, but because of the grace she showed when the world tried to humiliate her. When others would have folded, Zora stood still. When they mocked her gown, she made it art. When they doubted her invitation, she became the headline. Every major outlet scrambled to catch up. Vogue, the underdog who outshined the A-list. Essence, Zora Sinclair, didn't just attend the Met. She rewrote the dress code. The New York Times, the guest of honor, that security couldn't see coming. But perhaps the most poetic twist came a week later. The MET Gala's board of directors released their official statement. At first, it was the usual corporate backpedal, regret, review, retraining. But then came the twist that no one saw coming. Next year's Met Gala theme, Invisible No More, curated by and inspired by Zora Sinclair. Inspired by her. The very woman they tried to dismiss would now be designing the narrative. Not just attending, but leading. The red carpet she was denied would now be painted in her palette. Her name, once laughed at behind fans and headsets, would grace every invitation. And security? They'd be trained using her story as a case study. Zora didn't gloat. She didn't release a statement. She simply posted one photo on Instagram, her hand clasped with Jasmin Crockett's on the museum steps. No caption, just the image. Because sometimes vindication needs no words. In a world obsessed with status, Zora reminded everyone what true value looks like. Not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. And when the next year's carpet is rolled out in her honor, the fashion world will remember. They tried to erase her. Now she is the canvas. In a world that tries to define you by its own narrow standards, remember this. Your worth is never determined by someone else's refusal to see you. Keep walking with purpose. Stay true to who you are, and trust that in the end, they'll have no choice but to recognize your power.